Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's Thursday, 6 o'clock Eastern Time on September the 20th. And one of our regulars here, Sebastian P., who apparently has been waiting all day for me to do this. I set up the live stream on the schedule this morning, and a number of you have been kind of hanging around all day, which I think is really great, but he wants me to sing a song at the beginning. So I want to just see how good you guys are with this. So here's the thing. I'm going to sing this tune. The first thing that came to mind, Sebastian, was an old television show that you might have to be, well, I would think if you're at least in your 40s, you might remember it, but we'll see. Anyway, the tune went like this. Where, oh, where are you tonight? Why did you leave me here all alone? I searched the world over and thought I found true love. You met another and you was gone. Okay, so, because Sebastian challenged you, he wanted me to sing something at the beginning of my video. I don't know why, but there it is. Now, if you can name the show and name it was a duet. So you need to name both the singers that sang that. So I'll keep an eye on the chat and see what everybody says. In the meantime, all right. Well, Mirtha Gunter is the winner here because she did come up immediately with the answer as hee haw. And thanks, Christopher. Really appreciate it. And thank you, James Trumbull. Nope, hee haw is the answer. So now you got to tell me who's the Buck Owens and Roy Clark. I'm thinking no. I don't think it was. But anyway, I'm wondering if it was somebody I was thinking of. I'm going to have to double check this. We'll do that a little bit later. Let's get some weather done here for tonight. And we do have the Hurricane Center talking about a few things, but none of these things, I'm glad I made your day, Sebastian. None of these systems here pose any threat to anybody anytime soon, if at all. If you look out to the east off the Carolinas, now we could probably get into some argument, and it's on the satellite. It's the cloud mass that's the furthest left on the picture. It's almost off the screen. There is a developing low that's out there, and it has some tropical characteristics to it, but there's also a lot of dry air on the west side. You can see the clouds, the thinning clouds that are on the northwestern quadrant. So there's not a whole lot with this, and the Hurricane Center does mention that in its outlook, and we're going to take a look at that. And then, of course, we're still kind of in the same place with regards to what we discussed yesterday with a system well out in the Atlantic, and we'll look at that as well. Here's the Hurricane Center's forecast. This is the 5-day outlook, by the way, not the 2-day outlook, but the 5-day outlook. And they have a number of systems that they're watching, including one coming off the African coast, another one that's east of the windwards. If you look, when we look at the satellite a little bit later on, I'll pull it up. We'll see the extent of the cloud cover that's out there. And the intertropical convergence zone is somewhat active, but it's not the most ideal situation in the world with regards to development. So, by the way, if you go to the NHC NOAA.gov website and click on the 5-day outlook tab on the map, so you can pull up each wave, and it'll tell you what the probabilities are. 20% for the system, the long stretch of disturbed weather and tropical wave, 20% in the next 5. The one near the windwards is 10%, so it's virtually non-existent. 20% for the one off the Atlantic coast, mentioning some signs of organization. And then the one that's out that they're expecting to develop in the central Atlantic, that they're giving a 50% chance over the next 5 days. And models do bear that out. But right now, from what I'm seeing, much of this stuff is going to be with regards to the ocean as far as impact is concerned. The satellite, bring up the loop and take a look at the wide satellite view, the African dust, the Saharan dust that was evident in the shading that you see that kind of stands out there near the islands, that's the Saharan dust. If you remember yesterday, it was this gigantic finger that was pointing northward. That has lessened considerably. It looks like the dust is just being sort of scattered about. Straight to the north of that, you can see the turning of that low out in the Atlantic. And then, of course, we've got the disturbed weather that is east of the windwards. A little bit of turning there, but nothing really, worthwhile. And then further west, you've got what looks like a fairly strong tropical wave that's beginning to move off the African coast with some disturbed weather offshore. So there will be things to watch over the next couple of weeks, and I'm still keying on the idea of maybe toward the end of the month for something to come out of the Caribbean somewhere, but we'll see how that plays. And I don't see anything impacting the U.S. anytime soon, unless something really surprises, and I'm not anticipating that at the moment. So tonight's weather, and this is a good time to remind everybody that tonight's weather is active across the plains and in the upper Midwest. So if you are watching this later on, the radar you're seeing here is from about 6 o'clock Eastern time, so it will be dated. Be sure to check your local National Weather Service website, and you can access that by going to weather.gov. But we do have some areas of strong thunderstorms moving into parts of southwestern Minnesota and northwestern Iowa, and then it looks like another band in West Kansas, and that's all sort of embedded in a larger area of showers and storms. I just want to sneak up. Let me just sneak in the Storm Prediction Center's map here. Hang on. There you go. So actually, we have a fairly large area of slight risk of severe weather. And the marginal risk is even bigger, obviously. And that runs from northern Kansas northeastward into the upper Mississippi Valley and over into the western Great Lakes. And there is a larger area of, an area of larger risk, a slight risk, and an area of even higher risk, an enhanced risk that covers northernmost Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and into parts of western Wisconsin. So looks like it's going to be a busy severe weather evening over that part of the U.S. anyway. Let me just fix this up here, and I'll bring this back full screen on the radar. There we go. Okay, so that's the weather there. I just want to give you a peek of what's going on. Not too much happening in the east. Some scattered cells over parts of western Florida. And we have, let me update this. There we go. Also still have some weather going on in terms of some downpours and thunderstorms over parts of the eastern Texas. And the tropical depression that moved, remember we were talking yesterday about this tropical depression that formed in the Gulf of California that moved inland. And that rain is going to be spreading, has been spreading its way northwestward. You know what, let me see if I can... let's pull up let's go back to the Hurricane Center's page here. And we'll go to the East Pacific view. And most of that rain now, the depression is well inland, but a lot of that moisture is finding its way into New Mexico and into the southern plains. And there's flash flooding issues that are going on with that in some areas. So that tropical moisture, I've seen it does happen from time to time. As small as a body of water that is, you can have a system where the center is over water, some of the circulation is over land, but some of it is over the warm waters of the Pacific. Usually this sort of stuff happens late in the hurricane season, so you won't see that, say, in June or July, but you certainly could see it in the latter part of August, and we do see it in the month of September. So moisture from some of these Pacific systems working its way northeastward. So why don't we take a look at where we're going weather pattern wise, and we're going to look at the GFS tonight, the brand new one, which is out to 132 hours. So that at least will take us into day 6 in the long range. And we'll move it along for you. That storm system in southern Minnesota really wraps itself up. For this time of year, a 92 low into Lake Superior is pretty exceptional, and moves on up and intensifies even further. By the way, off the Carolinas, you do have that low that I showed you on the satellite. I don't think that really is, we've kind of been having this conversation with regards to, is it the remnant of Florence or isn't it? Because it all sort of got intertwined in that big frontal zone. It seems to me the Hurricane Center is treating these systems all as brand new. So if something were to develop, it would not get the name Florence again. If it were the remnants of Florence, they would have mentioned it in their discussion, but they did not. Here's the next weather front. That is really a fairly strong storm that's moving near James Bay on Friday afternoon. But because all the energy is going fairly far to the north, the trailing cold front is going to start to lose its punch. There will be some strong to possibly severe thunderstorms moving into eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, western New York Friday evening, and also some hefty weather going on in parts of North Texas and Oklahoma. Now, again, this is part of some of this moisture is from that tropical depression. We also, by the way, have a system approaching the Pacific Northwest and coming in with some rain. Now, that front in the east weakens as it moves eastward, so the thunderstorms start to fall apart. The New England part of it holds together a bit better, but everybody else sees it weaken. And in the meantime, the moisture in the southern plains kind of shifts into the Gulf states. For what seems like the umpteenth time, another front coming through that stalls out to the south across Virginia and West Virginia. Although thankfully, while there might be some showers and storms with that Saturday night, it doesn't look all that impressive. Looks like the high wants to press down, and that will at least take the edge off of any rain that might fall in that area. Also, you see the little kind of hump there in the isobar off the southeast coast. So that is the model's reflection of that low that is north of Bermuda and going to be dropping south-southeastward and eventually turn southwest and westward. The models are not, none of the models that I looked at, save for the Canadian model yesterday, which spun it up again as it got toward the coast, but none of the other models seem to be doing this. Eventually that high gives way, and we have another front that's coming through or approaching for late Tuesday and Wednesday, and again, this one doesn't hold together too well. It does somewhat with some showers and storms. The real change will probably come after this. We are going to have to wait for a strong short wave, a strong upper air trough to take shape in the eastern part of the United States, and that may happen next weekend. I'm going to just jump. I'll come back to the tropics. I want to go to, I got the wrong view here. I wanted to go to the North American view. So we'll look at the upper air going forward. And back we go to present time with that flat ridge in the southeast. The Canadian jet somewhat active. The boundary zone is somewhere just north of 35 degrees north. You've got this faster west-east flow as you move further north toward Canada. And in Canada, it's a cold flow that dominates. Well, going into next week, we get a little bit of ridging in the east, but gradually a strong trough takes over across the central Canada on southward into the plains and Great Lakes. And this might eventually bring through a more important cold front. I have to back one run up so we can go out further. This is coming for later next week and next weekend, and I think this will be a driver for a fairly impressive shot of cool air for this time of year anyway, and in some places you might want to call it cold. I'm assuming, by the way, that the model is not going to back off on this idea. It's been consistent with it for days now. I've just pulled up the European, which seems to get there, but just takes a little bit longer. It doesn't have that, it still has a little bit more of a flat ridge across the southeast, back through Texas and back into Baja California. So the westerlies come down, but they don't come down nearly as far as the GFS has. So it may just be that the European might take a little bit longer to get there, but I would really like to see the GFS's idea come to fruition, if only so that we could get a nice, clean push of cool, dry air for everyone to enjoy. Right now, we only have the long range out on the new model run to next Wednesday night. So I think what we'll do is at this point, we'll go back to the tropics and take a look at what's going on in the tropical Atlantic. We'll pull up that region for you. And we'll start with the upper air for the present time. So there you have it. So here you guys can see there's a big upper high here. This is this afternoon, sitting in western North Carolina, western South Carolina, northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee. Where you see the darker blues, that's the colder air up to the north, especially it's reflecting itself aloft with below normal heights and a fast flow across Canada. Of course, at this time, we're watching this system in the central Atlantic dropping southward, just kind of trapped now. You've got an upper high. This is Sunday the 23rd. So you've got an upper high off the Atlantic coast. You've got an upper high over the Azores. This system sandwiched in the middle. And the question of whether the next short wave that moves through eastern Canada, does it pick it up or not? And the answer seems to be no. In fact, it gets re-energized. Like, I don't even know what if this is the case. Looks like another short wave drops into it to the north. There's one system further south and one to the north, kind of donutting. And there's actually a third system sitting over the Azores here. Really interesting. What does this look like on the surface? Look, so it has. All right. So here's. Let's go back. So here's that. First off, watch the low that's furthest west near Bermuda drops southward and just kind of disappears and weakens. The one that's out in the central Atlantic, part of it heads towards Ireland. We've been talking about another storm for the weekend going into Ireland and England, but the models have really backed off on the strength of this, and that makes sense based on the upper air. The central Atlantic low drops, kind of meanders in all sorts of directions here. First, sometimes a little east, a little west, a little south, and then a little east again. And if you look up to the northeast of that, there's another separate circulation that forms pretty far north at about 42, 43 north. That's pretty far north to see something form of a tropical nature. Not impossible, but it is kind of up there. And that's as far as it goes. I honestly think that, judging from what's going on over North America, it's hard for me to fathom this turning westward. It would have to really set up much like it did with Florence, where it gets underneath this upper high, the one that's anchored from the Gulf states northeastward, if it somehow eventually sort of envelopes around it. But this looks a bit different because it seems to be complicated by all this energy that's running around in the northern stream. So I'm not really, right now I'm not really overly enthused by what I'm seeing in terms of the upper air going forward as far as the tropics are concerned. And being that none of the models seem to be kicking up anything in the short range, we'll take a back seat and let things play out. Again, I do see, there are some hints, stronger hints of maybe something toward the very end of September, early October, coming out closer to home. But we're going to have to just let the upper air just play itself out from that standpoint. There is something I'm going to show you because we know that autumn is coming. We have the last day of summer for Friday. Good riddance as far as I'm concerned. But before we do that, let me just really quick just tell you a little bit about my Patreon platform. If those of you who have joined it, thank you very much. I really appreciate that greatly. It is a great way to get my latest website posts and a lot of stuff that I'm posting there. By the way, I'm not posting on my website. So if you go to the link, I'm going to put it up on the chat board in just a second. It looks like this. There are different tiers. It starts at $2 a month, and you'll get my website posts. You're going to get posts that are not going to be on the website. They all come ad-free. There's an app on Patreon that you could use so that you could use that on your phone for fast loading. I have been cutting, and members know this, I've been cutting daily videos just for Patreon members. I've been doing that at 9 in the morning Eastern time. I'm going to be producing some more content exclusive for Patreon members going forward, especially as we get deeper into the fall and in the winter time. I'll still be doing it in other places. I'm just adding this. So if you want an added weather experience, it's a cup of coffee a month is a cheap way to get what I think is a lot of decent weather stuff, and you can at the same time lending support to my channel and what I'm doing here as I'm trying to build my little weather empire. So thank you very much for those of you who have joined, and for those of you who will consider it. There is the link for it for Patreon. It's in the middle of the chat. Now, let me come to the board for a little bit. Do I need to download a new app in order to join Patreon? You can download, Israel, the Patreon app, or you can do it off the desktop and join up that way, and then download the app afterwards. You can do it whichever is easier for you. Going back to the original song, which was from Hee Haw, I'm trying to see. I want to make sure I get the right answer on this. I'm pretty sure of one of them. Who sang "Where, Oh Where Are You Tonight"? Buck Owens, and well, it depends. Let's see. So, and Archie Campbell. Archie Campbell. There's like a whole bunch of different ones. For some reason, I thought it was Tennessee Ernie that sung. Tennessee Ernie that sung it. No, it was Archie Campbell and Grandpa Jones, right? Well, there's all sorts of different shots here, but it was Hee Haw. Okay, all right. Back to weather, and you guys on the board. Our English and Irish friends, says Timothy Veltman, now have a Bronan to deal with. I'm guessing that the most impressive of the gales to hit. Well, the thing is that judging from what I was looking at yesterday and certainly today, the models have really backed off on the one. It really looked, of all of the gales that have been going in to Ireland and England and Scotland in the last couple of, since it started with the remnants of Helene, this one, then you had Ali, and that caused some problems. This one apparently just the models have really kind of backed off. I mean, it's a tight little low that brings rain and some wind, but the pressures now, instead of having pressures down under 980 millibars, it's more like 1,003, 1,004. It's just a much weaker system than was being modeled earlier, and I don't see the models changing that trend. By the way, they keep coming in a little weaker with every single run. James Trumbull, I bet it's cool up here in Maine. You got the big high up there, so you got some decent cool weather up. Some of that cool air got to me today, and it'll be here this weekend behind the next front. But I really want something, sizable in terms of cool air. Raymond, you got slight risk of severe thunderstorms tomorrow. Low Cape, high shear. That's probably, excuse me. That's probably what it's going to be. We're really coming, to the last gasp as far as severe weather is concerned in the Northeast. Not saying it's impossible, but it is a bit of a last gasp effort here. Priscilla Mayu, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you on board. You're right. It's only a matter of time, Timothy Veltman, before these wrapped up lows are passing through these parts instead of south central Canada. Well, that's the direction that we are headed in, and at least it looks like the trough wants to be in the east. Weather Hub TV, I'm really not overly concerned. Also now getting long in the tooth, by the way, is the Cape Verde season as far as tropical storms and hurricane development is concerned. That seems to be, this is about the time where it starts to wind down. Let me show you a couple of things. Autumn coming to starting and summer coming to an end. I put up a link before. I'll put it up again for you in a moment. But from this website, and here's the website. It's Iowa State University, the Iowa Environmental Mesonet. Okay, and what you can do is for all around the country, you can set up all these different parameters. You pick locations. You can limit it by month or by season. And you can select all these different chart types. Really, top 10 hourly precipitation reports. All these weird combination of things that, given certain circumstances could be, rather interesting to look at. And one of the ones that I pulled up today, which I've gotten here, and I think I showed you guys this back about a month or so ago, looking at the summer as a whole. And I'm looking at Islip Airport on Long Island, which is very close to my house. I can walk to it practically. It's only about a couple of miles away. But this chart shows the number of hours where the dew point this summer on Long Island was over 70. And if going back to 1971 or 2, you every so often you do see these kind of spikes up toward about 600 hours with regards to time spent with dew points over 70. But this year we had what I would call a super spike where we had over 800 hours this summer. So the equivalent of about 34 days, roughly, where the dew point was above 70. And trust me when I tell you that those days were horrible because for a vast majority of them, it happened with no wind. And it felt like during the day like you were, walking through a bowl of soup, and at night it felt like you were swimming in a bowl of soup because if you didn't have the air conditioning on, you couldn't really open the window. But I'm going to put the link up on this for you weather folks that like to play with this sort of stuff. You could pick a lot. There are points all over the U.S. and all over the world that you can look at. So. Here's the link. It's a little long, but it does get a bit reduced. And you can take a look at that and, like I said, play around with it and perhaps learn a few things about the weather in your particular area. Johnny Quest, you might like this because there's also some precip stuff, and you can look at what you had this year compared to past years with regards to the distribution of rainfall. I'm sure you'll come up with some very, very interesting numbers. Seth Dominus, it was 838.9 hours and not 839, just to be clear. Anna Maria Passaretti, thanks for being here. Weather Enlow and the endless search for humidity and looking to be saved by tropical storms, hurricanes, and snowstorms that 99% of the time don't happen. For you, you will have to probably wait until late next week when that stronger cold front comes into play. Okay, until then, your humidity is still going to be a big issue. Joseph Mayano, congratulations! You want Thursday to be a nice day. All right, you know what? Stay with me, Joe. You're getting married next Thursday, and you want nice weather in the Hudson Valley. Let's take a look at what lay models are saying in the long range. And we'll bring the GFS back up. So I'm going, let me jump back That was, by the way, what you're seeing on up here now. This is the this is the GFS over Europe for Saturday night, Sunday morning, 6 a.m. with that next low, and it's just not really that impressive as it moves on through. It starts to strengthen after it moves into northwestern Europe and then continues into Siberia. This was forecast to strengthen much sooner than that. It's just taking way too long. So I think that should spare you the worst of this. But I'll make sure we'll keep an eye on things overnight and tomorrow to see if there are any additional trends. All right, Joe. So you've got this big high. You know, after this cold front comes through here, this big high builds in. You are going to have this onshore flow for a good part of next week, so the humidity is going to be back. The next front comes on Wednesday late, so it looks like you might get a dry day on Thursday. The next high going by to your north builds in early Thursday, so Thursday and maybe a good chunk of Friday next week look fine. And here's the stronger cold front that by 198 hours, which is next Friday night, begins its approach. But I got to tell you, I'm wondering, as I said earlier, the models have had this habit of showing these big highs and these plunging cool air masses coming pretty far to the south, and when we get to reality, it's much less dynamic. I wonder if we're going to go the same way again this time. So here's that tropical system in the central Atlantic. It just basically just sits there and does nothing. The one to the north actually, you know, there's an identifiable low there that moves west-northwestward, and then it just meanders there and weakens. So this takes us to September 29th. I'm underwhelmed, and it doesn't look like, at least from the standpoint of the GFS, when you see the green that's splashed across the tropical Atlantic, you know, there are tropical waves in there, but nothing seems to develop. Again, I'm thinking maybe as we get into the first couple of days of October, maybe we're setting up for something down in the Caribbean where pressures are going to be on the low side. In fact, we do see something that gets fired up on the Pacific side of Central America, and sometimes that happens when you get that gyre that of moisture that forms over Central America from time to time, and it winds up you know, usually spawning a couple of systems along the way on either side or both sides, or sometimes only on one of the two sides, either east or west. So we'll see how it plays going forward. So let me come back to the chat board real quick, and then we're going to end it maybe a little early tonight because the weather is a bit on the quiet side. So give me 1 second here. I just want to set it up. And okay. And any last minute, fingers crossed on next Thursday. Like I said, you got a shot here that things are going to be okay for you. And congratulations, by the way. Was Islip significantly more humid than New York City? A little bit more humid, but even Kennedy more so than LaGuardia. So it was, you know, the closer you were to the ocean, yeah, you definitely saw the dew point numbers at Kennedy were almost as high as they were at Islip. LaGuardia they were high, but a little bit less. Where they were about as high, which kind of surprised me a little bit, was in northwest Jersey, because that's pretty far inland. And there's elevation there, but the humidity levels there also above 70 also exceeded 800 hours. They have a small data set as far as the records go. So you can't say it was the most humid in 50 years or 40 years. I think there was only about 20 or so years of data. But still, to accumulate almost 800 hours of dew points above 70 when you don't really have a strong ocean exposure is pretty impressive in my view. Box 505, I'll be in the Adirondacks until next Sunday. Looks like I'll be leaving just in time before the cool weather moves in. You will have that big high up to the north, so it's not exactly going to be that warm up your way. But the cool weather will have to come next weekend and beyond. Anthony Orr, our resident statistician, when Florence was situated at 22.7 north, 46.6 west, It became the northernmost Category 4 hurricane east of 50. Correct. And the first one to come into the United States at a landfall that formed that far north. A remarkable storm, really, under an equally remarkable weather pattern that drove it eastward. I'm sorry, that drove it westward. Because usually those storms don't ever make it anywhere close to landfall in the United States. This was the first one to be that far north and east and to come and make a landfall in North Carolina. If you've got the upper air pattern that supports it, you could wind up having all sorts of things happen. West, I corrected myself, 99 wolves. You know, sometimes it's hard. Johnny Quest, a short wave. Okay, so when I show you on the upper air, you've got a deep trough that runs from, say, southern Canada all the way down to Texas. We would call that a long wave. All right, it's a long wave trough. It's got a long wavelength, and it goes pretty far north and runs pretty far south. So a short wave would be something that would be smaller than that, maybe about half the size. They would have, weather systems that might impact only a smaller area of geography, while a long wave will impact a much larger area because the length of that wave is exactly that. It's longer. It's pretty much what it says it is. I can show you. I'll bring it up. Let me bring the GFS up again, and we can see if we got some good examples of this. So I'll put the upper air. All right. It's got a broad trough. So if you look here, look in eastern Canada here on this map. So you see where there's this upper low that's sitting in the waters between Labrador and Greenland, okay? And there is a trough that extends from there, from the coast of Labrador there, north of Newfoundland, where you see there's kind of like an indentation. It sort of makes like a U or a V shape there that goes west-south-westward. That would be a shortwave trough that's rotating around that upper low. Now, with respect to what looks like a long wave, is going to be, let me see if I can find one. Find the maps on the upper air. I want to get the right geography. All right, you got short waves here that are rotating around these upper lows, and if you follow, you can see the indentations there. See that? The wavelength here is not very far to the south. You could argue that there's a broad long wave trough here that extends from central Canada down into the southeastern part of the United States. Not the sometimes you'll get them where they're much sharper looking in terms of their shape and structure. Trying to see if there's anything out in the Atlantic that would resemble that. And well, here's one. I mean, it's actually, you got a couple of short waves. The trough fractures, but if you were to treat this as one trough that's out in the central Atlantic, that would be an example of a long wave trough. But it looks like it's broken into pieces into several short waves that are actually in there. So I hope that clarifies it. And you'll see me when I draw them on the maps, when I mark the lines through them to show you where the actual shortwave trough is. We've got some Browns and Jets fans on board tonight, I'm seeing. I will remain agnostic as far as that is concerned. All right. Sonia Rivera, nice to see you. Good evening to you. You're just joining on a little bit late, so you might have to watch it on the replay because it's coming up on 20 minutes before the hour. Go Jets for David Schwartz. I can't really, I can't cast stones here because of how badly the Giants have played their first two games. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. I watched. Haven't watched hardly any football these first two games. So we're going to leave it at that. One more time, folks. Patreon link up there for those of you who'd like to join my Patreon platform. It's a great way to support what I'm doing. Sebastian P., thank you very much for hitting Super Chat. I accepted your challenge to sing a song, and you got a song of from Hee Haw. I hope that sufficed. It's funny because when you said that, my mind suddenly went blank, and I kept thinking, what am I going to sing for this guy? And then that jumped into that was the first thing that jumped in. Patrick McGill, yep, got to see my grandson yesterday, in fact, and spent some time. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here. And you are on Patreon, so thank you very much for being on there. All right, so schedule tomorrow. Patreon users, you'll get your 9 a.m. Actually, you may not get your 9 a.m. live stream because I got some technical work I have to do on my websites and things and my new app. So my buddy who's helping me with this is going to be coming to my house at 9 o'clock. So I'm thinking tomorrow, 8:30, 8:30 live stream for Patreon. We'll do it a little bit earlier. The Joe and Joe show, weather show tonight at 9:15 on Facebook. You can join us there for that on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. And thank you, Charlie Baker, for signing on to Patreon. I really appreciate it very much. I hope you enjoy it. And you can message me at any time, by the way, and I will try to respond to you in a timely fashion. Patreon members get first priority as far as responding to messages and comments over Facebook. And, well, I do respond to comments that are put on the YouTubes after they're loaded in the library, but sometimes I don't get to them till late. So the Patreon folks, you guys are first and at the front of the line. Okay, so Patreon tomorrow, 8:30 for those of you on Patreon. We will have our regular Friday YouTube live cast, and think up some questions you'd like to ask me. We can do it. Maybe we'll spend some time. You could do it in a form of Ask Me Anything type of Friday, and you throw some questions at me, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them, whatever you want to talk about. And then tomorrow night, we'll do the Joe and Joe show to finish off the week. Going to take a little bit of downtime over the weekend, but I'm sure I'll be doing stuff from time to time, so I'll keep you abreast of the schedule. Have a great evening, stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow.